Hey, what is up guys? So if you've seen the movie by now, clearly you want to know about some of the great Easter eggs that are in Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now with that in mind, this video is going to feature spoilers of course, because we got to talk about some of the elements that happen in that movie. So here is the Easter eggs of Star Wars The Force Awakens. So the first one we're going to focus on is one that features Rey, as she's alone and sitting by the crashed AT-AT. Now how exactly did this AT-AT get here? Well, if you guys play Star Wars Battlefront, you can actually play the Battle of Jakku map, which takes place right after the fall of the Empire. And this was a massive battle, so everything of course here is what happened in the aftermath. Everything's kind of just been left behind and not cleaned up. Of course it has been scavenged as we see in the movie. Now back to talking about this Easter egg is the helmet that is right next to Rey. Now the writing on it has actually been translated and it translates to Rey. Not literally the Rey we know in the movie, but another pilot that was probably named Rey. Now the next Easter egg features someone from the Star Trek franchise, which of course was rebooted by J.J. Abrams. And this is regarding Simon Pegg's role in Star Wars. Simon Pegg is actually the junkyard dealer Unkar Plus. He is the one who's handing out all the rations and of course orders the attack on Rey when she has the droid and decides not to sell it to him. Now by the sounds of it, a lot of people absolutely love this character, and that is of course BB-8, who is a standout in this movie. Now when it comes to actually doing BB-8's voice, two people are credited. The first being Ben Schwartz, who is best known for his roles in such TV shows as House of Lies, BoJack Horseman, Robot Chicken, and the other is Bill Hader, whose notable roles consist of South Park, Saturday Night Live, Superbad, and Inside Out. Next up is an Easter egg relating Finn. Now when Finn is in the Millennium Falcon, he ends up going through some junk that is in one of the containers. One of these pieces of junk is a callback to Star Wars A New Hope, and it's of course Luke's Jedi training sphere. And while we're here still talking about Finn, let's talk about his name. His Stormtrooper number is FN-2187. Now those last four numbers might sound familiar, and if we go back to Star Wars A New Hope, you guys will remember that the detention level, block AA-23, was where Leia was held, in cell block 2187, the same as Finn's number. And while we're here talking about Stormtroopers, let's talk about a famous actor who is none other than Daniel Craig, who is of course James Bond. Now he actually appears in the scene involving Rey when she is captured and when she mind controls a Stormtrooper to let her go. This is actually Daniel Craig in that armor. Now this movie introduced us to a character named Poe Dameron. Now the Star Wars universe is no stranger to actually strange names, so looking at the name Poe Dameron might seem like normal, but we now actually know where it comes from. J.J. Abrams' daughter actually has a polar bear who she names Poe. And the last name, well, that's actually J.J. Abrams' assistant who works tirelessly with him and has been through, with him through a lot. And her name is actually Morgan Dameron. Now in the Star Wars universe, when it comes to strange creatures, we're all very familiar with them. But one such strange creature was of course the Ewoks, which made their debut in Star Wars Return of the Jedi. And everybody's favorite Ewok, Wicket, was played by none other than Warwick Davis. And he actually does have a cameo in this movie. During the scene where we actually see Han Solo, Finn, and Rey in Maz Kanata's cantina, he is one of the background characters named Woolivan. Now, if any of you guys have seen The Maze Runner or ABC and Disney's own television series Once Upon a Time, you might recognize Thomas Brodie-Sangster. And he actually has a role as a background character as a First Order agent. And speaking of young people making their appearances, Carrie Fisher's daughter actually has a role in this movie. She appears along with the Resistance in the movie, and her hair is of course in buns. Now we all know by now that J.J. Abrams loves to put some of his best friends and favorite actors into movies he does, and this movie is of course no different, because Greg Grunberg, who is best known for his roles in such TV series as Heroes and Lost, is one of the actual pilots that comes in at the end to help Poe Dameron. And the name of his character is Snap Wexley. Now during the scene where Rey actually gets to touch Luke's and Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber, we see her kind of have flashes of the past, the future, the present, and everything related to the Force. Now there are quite a few Easter eggs in this scene, and one of the most important ones is a callback to The Empire Strikes Back in the scene where we see Darth Vader attack Luke Skywalker with surprise. And another is a moment that she actually gets to hear Ewan McGregor doing his Obi-Wan Kenobi voice actually scream out Rey. Another Easter egg is the fact during the final fight where we see Rey actually take on Kylo Ren, she ends up getting the upper hand and ends up scarring him. He is now scarred the same way that Anakin was. Now back on Jakku, when we are following Rey, we see her home as she's making some food. Now she actually has a doll on the back of one of the shelves, and it's very reminiscent of a certain fighter pilot outfit. This of course being the rebel outfits that were worn by such characters as Luke Skywalker. Now there is a scene where they are actually in the Millennium Falcon trying to figure out what's wrong with it, and one of the lines is the motivator's busted. Now of course this isn't the first time we've heard about this, because there is a droid we're all familiar with from A New Hope, R5-D4, who also blows his motivator. Now there is a scene in the movie where Finn just happens to lean on the chess table and it activates, and we of course see the same chess table and the same graphics and characters that were in Star Wars A New Hope. Now after Finn has a malfunction, we actually see the First Order arguing about what they should be doing with these, and the clones are actually brought up as one solution. Now, it wouldn't just be a Star Wars movie if we didn't have some famous quotes. And of course, we have one of the most famous lines in any Star Wars movie, and that is, "I have a bad feeling about this." And this is actually the words that Han Solo says in this movie, when some bad things are about to go down on his freighter. Now, throughout the movie, we actually see that Kylo Ren is absolutely obsessed with his grandfather, who is of course Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader. And when Rey first touches the lightsaber, we see some very, gruesome and familiar shots. One of these shots is actually the Knights of Ren, what looks to be probably Jedi training grounds where Luke Skywalker was training some people, and they are slaughtering tons and tons of people while it's raining. Now this is very reminiscent of course, what happened on Coruscant when Anakin Skywalker turned to the dark side. So chances are that we actually had Kylo Ren trying to get closer to the dark side, so he recreated what his grandfather did. Now some more familiar faces do actually end up making appearances in the movie. Not so much as Easter eggs, but they are worth mentioning. This is of course everybody's favorite Return of the Jedi one-liner Admiral Akbar, and Nien Nunb actually make appearances in the movie in the War Room. Now do you guys remember how we talked about Wexley earlier in the video? Well, this actually isn't his first appearance in anything in the new Star Wars canon. This character is actually Tameen Wexley from the Chuck Wendig Star Wars Aftermath book. And speaking of characters that are related to someone that we've seen before, Poe Dameron's parents actually are in the Star Wars comics. They are featured in the Star Wars Shattered Empire, which takes place around the same time as the ending of Return of the Jedi and a few weeks after. Now upon going to actually find Maz Kanata, as they are coming towards her temple, we see flags hanging everywhere. One flag is of course the noticeable markings of Boba Fett. Now Ken Lang, who is actually also known for Lost, another J.J. Abrams series, is actually in this playing an admiral for the Resistance. Also, while keeping it in the family, J.J. Abrams' actual father plays a character in this movie. He plays Captain Cypress. Now, another interesting Easter egg is that characters such as Snoke actually went through various designs, and before they got their final one, they actually almost had one that was used but was later rejected. This character would actually appear in Star Wars Rebels as a new Inquisitor in Season 2. Now, in the movie, we actually get to see Captain Phasma, who is captured by our heroes, and Han has a great idea to throw them into a trash compactor. This is of course a reference to Star Wars A New Hope. Now going back to Jakku, where we actually see for the first time that Rey runs into BB-8, she tells him to go over and kind of leave her alone and which way to head to find a city. She tells him to go to Kelvin Ridge. Now, Kelvin Ridge is actually named after Kelvin, the name of J.J. Abrams' grandfather, who actually helped shape him into the director and what his future would be. Now, if you're a Star Wars buff, you're probably familiar with Ralph McQuarrie, who did a lot of the early conceptual works for many of the most iconic Star Wars things that we know today. And the inspiration for Rey's look actually comes from old conceptual art from Luke Skywalker for Star Wars A New Hope. Now, going back to speak about Maz Kanata and what is happening in her temple, when Rey goes and opens a box, it's actually a box we have all seen before in Star Wars A New Hope. This is the same box that Anakin's lightsaber was in before Obi-Wan gives it to Luke Skywalker. Now, if you guys have seen the film The Raid, you might have recognized that two of the characters who were involved in the scene with Han Solo on his freighter ship are actually the stars of that movie. Now, going back to Ralph McQuarrie's art, it's actually very prominent on Jakku. The big entrance to Jakku is actually something that McQuarrie had originally drawn as conceptual art for Tatooine. and this was supposed to be originally the entrance to Jabba the Hutt's palace. Now speaking of Jakku, one of the background characters on the planet is actually Sarko Plank. Now Sarko Plank in the new canon only has one appearance, and he is actually the first person Luke Skywalker hand-to-hand fights and actually attacks him with a lightsaber. And this is all featured in the book Star Wars: The Weapon of a Jedi. Now another thing I should mention is of course the Starkiller base. Now to many of you, the Starkiller name might actually be the most synonymous with of course Starkiller from Star Wars: The Force Unleashed. But it goes way back further than that, because originally Luke Skywalker was supposed to be called Luke Starkiller. Now you all remember Ralph McQuarrie. I've talked about him a few times in this video. Well, his original design for R2-D2 was kind of reminiscent of what would be known as BB-8, but the technology back in the day just did not allow for this to actually happen. And while we're talking about Ralph McQuarrie, let's just mention that the new snowtroopers are actually a direct representation of what he originally had in mind when he drew these. Now of course, you know, these are more modern, but they actually do keep the same insignias on them as he intended. Now when Rey and Finn first meet Han Solo, they actually end up talking about, you know, some of the history behind them, and Rey actually mentions that if this is the Millennium Falcon that actually did the Kessel Run in 14 parsecs. Han pauses for a second and screams 12. Hey, why not another Ralph McQuarrie Easter egg? You guys remember those sweet X-Wings that we had in the movie? Well, those are actually way back to the original conceptual art that was wanted for Star Wars. They of course didn't make it through for the original X-Wings, but they're actually back in this one. Now the Galactic Empire has always had connections with the Nazi SS Party. Now the First Order has actually taken it one step further. We find out that they actually kidnap children at a young age and pretty much make them hate and murder. And General Hux actually ends up giving a great speech about wiping out pretty much everybody who doesn't agree with them. And of course at the end of this, all the stormtroopers and First Order actual lieutenants all do a salute, which is now one arm up in the air, but the hand does not get extended. Now in the movie there is actually a scene where Kylo Ren takes off his helmet to interrogate Rey, and he ends up putting his helmet down into something. That something is actually the ashes of Anakin Skywalker. Now you all remember Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, right? If you haven't played it yet, go play it, one of the greatest RPGs of all time. But we're not here to talk about that right now, we're talking about a potential Easter egg. Now the planet that Luke is on at the end of the movie, many are saying that it bears resemblance to Rakata Prime. And as we learned in that game, this was the actual home planet of the ancient race of the Rakata. That and the fact that Luke Skywalker is of course missing somewhere in the galaxy kind of mirrors the fact that Revan also got exiled somewhere out there that no one could find him. Now obviously we know that Kylo Ren is related to Han Solo and Leia as he is their son, but there's also a connection to the old expanded universe. His name is Ben Solo, so we're all led to assume that is of course after Obi-Wan Kenobi, aka Old Ben Kenobi. But this could also be a reference to the old expanded universe by having him actually be named Ben after Ben Skywalker. So there it is guys, that is all the Easter eggs that I have for you in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this, I hope you learned something from it, and let me know what you thought about this, and if you find any other ones, let me know down below. So thank you for watching the video, and if you guys like what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you haven't already, check out some of these other great videos we have on the channel. Just click the annotation right there, it'll take you to them. Thank you for watching guys, and have a good one.